This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Monday, May 31st, 2010, and this is episode 727 of WDW Today. I'm Matt Hochberg of StudioCentral.com. And joining me on today's show is Mike Scopa, a senior feature writer and blogger for allears.net. Welcome, Mike.
On land, our animal friends give us new freedom, and we test drive many new models.
It's fun to be free. Be on the move.
The man, again. Wow.
Joining us on today's show as well is Mr. Mike Newell of Mouse World Radio. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Len, we listen to too much of Mouse World Radio, I believe.
Mouse World Radio too, exactly.
Is that even possible?
Yeah, as if those words even make sense in English.
Joining us as well is Len Testa, the co-author of the Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World. Happy Memorial Day, Len.
Thanks, Matt. Happy Memorial Day to you, too. And thanks to all of our veterans who have served for making us free.
Absolutely. Also joining us on today's show is Fred Hazelton, a master statistician for touringplans.com and, of course, the Unofficial Guide. Welcome back to the show, Fred.
Thank you, Matt. Please answer all the rumors. Are you going to be on the next season of Dancing with the Stars? People want to know.
I can neither confirm nor deny, but I will say I am heading to pick out shoes after this show.
Excellent.
On today's show, we're talking about the Crowd Calendar 2.0, and this is a major iteration of the Crowd Calendar. And of course, the Crowd Calendar is an aspect of touringplans.com, and I would pretend to try to describe it, but you know what? This is Len's baby. And Len's second baby. First baby was tossed out, and the second baby's here now. So, Len,
somewhere in there's a baby named Hannah, but yeah, there's a Crowd Calendar there as well. Yeah, so I think most of our listeners know, but the Crowd Calendar is something that we have on touringplans.com that recommends. It does two things. It predicts for every single day of the next year a particular crowd level of how large the crowds are going to be at Walt Disney World, and then for every day of the year, it recommends both the best park to go to and parks to avoid. So we've been doing this since like 2003, Fred?
Yeah,
for a while. Basically using one model that we had refined over and over again for a number of years, and this new revision marks a change in the way that we measured the crowd calendar, and there's some important differences with that. So if everyone wants to, if you're near a computer and you want to log on to touringplans.com, click on Tools, then click on Crowd Calendar, or just click on Crowd Calendar in the middle of the front page, and you'll see what we're talking about as we go through this. So Fred's been hard at work on the new version of the Crowd Calendar. We think it's going to be much easier to understand and much more accurate going forward. So that's why we brought Fred on. At the end of the live show, if you guys listened, we had a couple of quick questions at the end of it about the new ratings and what they meant. So we thought this would be a good follow-up topic based on that.
Sure. Now, Fred, first of all, before we can get to the new Crowd Calendar, tell us about the reasons why the Crowd Calendar 2.0 was necessary in the first place. Tell us about what improvements were made here to make it a better tool.
Well, the first Crowd Calendar was really designed because we get so many questions from readers about what time of year is the best to go. And so we thought, well, why not answer this question for everybody all at once by making a Crowd Calendar. So we were kind of limited as to sort of what we could use to come up with that calendar. So it was based on the peak time that we observed at the mountains at the Magic Kingdom. So Space Mountain, Splash Mountain, and Big Thunder Mountain. Because it was easy for us to gather that kind of information, and B, because those were sort of the headliner attractions. If those things were busy, everything else at the park was probably busy.
Yeah, people understood Space Mountain, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But if you give them an attraction like Jungle Cruise, not everyone knows what Jungle Cruise is.
Yeah, that's true.
Go ahead.
But the problem with our logic was that when you create a tool that's going to answer some questions, it ends up forcing people to ask a lot more. So we actually receive probably more than anything else questions about deciding between 2 days which is better. So that's what we thought. You know what? Perhaps we can, now that we have Lines, our mobile app, and we have so much more data, not just for the mountains, but for attractions all across Disney World. Perhaps we can use that to get a more broad picture of what the crowds are like, not just at the Magic Kingdom, but also throughout the entire resort.
Yeah. Now, Len, take us through some of the Crowd Calendar 2.0 changes here, because the numbers don't mean what they used to mean anymore.
Right. So there used to be, we always have the crowd calendar has for a long time had a 1 to 10 scale that represents how busy we think the park is going to be. 1 is supposed to be the least busy number, and 10 is supposed to be the maximum. And in crowd calendar 1.0, each number represented an incremental 10 minutes of wait at the headliner attractions. So if the crowd calendar rating was a 5, we expected the worst wait time of the day at the mountain attractions to be 50 minutes. 5 times 10 is 50. And if the crowd calendar rating was a 7, it would be 70 minutes. A 9 is 90 minutes, and so on. The new crowd calendar is slightly different than that, although relatively speaking, the numbers still mean the same thing. Like a 1 is great, and a 10 is very, very busy. But I'll let Fred explain the new scale.
Right. So the new scale is kind of working backwards in a sense, because what we find people are using the calendar for is to compare between two sets of days, whether it's today to tomorrow, or a day 5 months from now to a day 1 month from now. And so what we did is that we actually created a scale that's going to basically be treated as a rank. So rather than the number applying directly to a posted wait time, it's a rank that explains how that particular day compares to all other days. So a 10 would mean that particular day is in the busiest 10% of all days. A 9 would mean that it's in the second busiest 10% of days, and so on and so forth. So basically, it's almost like you can treat it as just a general 1 to 10 scale. 10 is very crowded, and 1 is not crowded at all.
Okay.
Fred and Len, the earlier versions of the crowd calendar, when you were dealing with the Magic Kingdom, didn't you use the mountains as a barometer for determining wait times? And aren't you changing that for crowd calendar too?
Yeah, that's yeah. The mountains were great because everyone understood them, but the problem with, and I'll let Fred explain this, the problem with the mountains is that you didn't get consistent wait times throughout the year. Fred, do you want to explain more?
Yeah, that's the thing, because Disney can they can change capacities of rides, especially like Big Thunder. They can add trains. Same thing for Space. They can add queues, this kind of thing. So although the wait time might stay the same on a particular day, the crowds are actually can be larger or smaller. And so with the old version of the crowd calendar, there were certain subtleties that we were just missing. So we were treating all the days as a 4, for example, as equal, when in fact there may be certain subtleties that aren't represented properly there. So that's why the new calendar, by taking all attractions combined all together, it's going to give us a broader picture. It's going to measure those subtleties. So, for example, families with young children who are going to spend most of their time in Fantasyland, it's going to apply better to them because it's including all the Fantasyland's attractions equally as the mountains.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Have you ever taken into consideration adjusting the crowd calendar to reflect wait times for the different lands? And the reason why I ask that is it possible that wait times in Tomorrowland would be greater than wait times in Adventureland?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we do now. In fact, we're doing that with lines, right? And with lines, we have an individual estimate at every time of the day for every attraction. So you could theoretically get a crowd counter that looks at lands, that looks at individual attractions. We can take it down, right to that level. I think it gets less meaningful though. The more that you drill down, because how do you really compare, the group of attractions in Fantasyland to Tomorrowland? Like if it's a 5 or 10 minute difference, what does that really mean in terms of people experience? So that's when it kind of gets a little bit cloudy. But we think by doing it this way, I mean, in statistical terms, it's a percentile. So we're saying, this particular day ranks, at what point from 1 to 10. So it kind of gives us a little bit. We're hoping over time it's going to be a more simpler way to look at the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the crowd calendar, this as in its current version, when you're looking at the levels here. So if I'm at, let's say, Epcot, and it's a 6. Now, the old version of 6 means, well, that's like 60-minute peak wait times. What does that really mean now? What does a 6 mean in Epcot?
Well, like I said, the best way to think of it is to think of it in terms of how the 6 relates to other days. So a 6 is going to be more crowded than a 5,
Right.
and a 7 is going to be more crowded than a 6. It's not saying it's going to be 10% more crowded. It's just saying that if you ranked all the days together, the 7 day is going to be more crowded than the 6. Interestingly, though, by doing this new scale, the 5 does mean the average. So you can, if you have a picture in your mind of what the average is like, that's what a 5 is. So because a 5 is going to be the average or the 50th percentile. So in that sense, you can kind of benchmark and say, okay, a 6 is going to be slightly above average.
Yeah, in the old scale, for a variety of reasons, an average day was 6.5 on the old scale, which means that the peak wait time for the mountains throughout the year was around 65 minutes, and that was difficult for a lot of people just looking at the calendar for the first time to sort of get, because usually on a 1 to 10 scale, 5 is average. Turns out that it's not. And again, it comes down to Disney trying to manage the capacity of the attraction to always ensure some sort of minimal wait time,
Right.
even during the slower times of the year.
Now, I think each park has an outlier. You know, the one attraction that totally skews every single data. Epcot has Soarin', Studios has Toy Story Midway Mania. To an extent, Animal Kingdom has Kilimanjaro Safaris, and the Magic Kingdom has Dumbo. You know, among others. So, how does that factor into the situation now?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we went with this method, because in a sense we're not letting Toy Story sort of dominate the scale. We're taking Toy Story individually and saying, okay, today it's a 95-minute wait. Well, how does that compare to an average day at Toy Story? So if the average day at Toy Story Mania is an 80-minute wait, well, then we know that this is above average. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we designed it this way, is because it's going to look at each attraction individually and, in a sense, compare it to itself. So that's kind of the most fair way to think about it.
Interesting. Fred, as the primary brain behind the Crowd Calendar 2.0 and making it function the way you wanted it to function, what was the most difficult aspect of it? Besides not taking out the Canadian computing grid. Again.
Like I told you, I made sure I rerouted everything through Buffalo. So everything was protected up here.
So sorry, New York.
I had to bounce it off a couple satellites, but we got it working.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if there was a major power outage in upstate New York, I apologize.
Yeah, has there been any sort of weird natural disaster lately that we could? Yeah, anyway.
We should probably explain that joke because we have a lot of new listeners.
Pretty slick.
Yeah, I get it. So well, I'll let Fred say it.
Yeah, the favorite story. Yeah, back in the day when I was working on this time I was working on hotel data. We were collecting it off the internet, and we were getting so much of it that we had at one point about 40 million hotel rate quotes. And here I am with my little desktop trying to do some statistical analysis on this and sort it at work. And of course, I ended up freezing the entire system.
Of the Canadian government.
Very embarrassing.
Yeah, of the Canadian government. So
Is that right?
Just
Okay,
east of Ontario. What's the big deal?
That's right. It was a cold winter that day.
Hey, is your system slow? Fred's hammering on his keyboard. No, mine's absolutely fine. No.
This blue screen's good news, right? Right.
Exactly.
So getting back to the original question, Fred, what was the most difficult aspect of computing Crowd Calendar 2.0?
Well, the computing, because we were doing it using Lions data, the computing wasn't so difficult. The tough part is trying to imagine how we're going to interpret this. How are we going to interpret this ourselves, and how are we going to explain it to our readers in a way that makes sense? Because the Crowd Calendar.
That's where we spent most of the time, I think. Try to figure out
because as much as we're sort of pointing out some of the faults in the old Crowd Calendar, it did a great job. It was it was very good. It was a well-used product. It was very popular. So I was worried that it was going to be kind of a new Coke thing where we're going to say why you're changing something that works. But so that was kind of one of our biggest concerns is how are we going to present this in a way that makes it easier for people to understand. So that was one of the major challenges. And Len can attest. He and I and Henry had many conversations trying to find analogies, finding ways to explain this in a simple way, and it's not easy.
That's the big thing is we're comfortable with the numbers and we understand what they mean. The thing is when you're trying to communicate to an audience of hundreds of thousands of people, many of whom have skills who, outside of the math realm, it's difficult to get around concepts like percentile ranking, standard deviations, bell curves, and stuff like that. It's just hard to do. So to explain it in as simple a way as possible, I think is the big thing for us. The other thing that was I think was a challenge, Fred, and I know we spent some time on this, was once we had finished the analysis of the lines data, we realized that we were going to have to change some recommendations, and we had this debate about whether to tell people at the last minute that our recommendations had changed, or to sort of keep everything the same for 30 days out. And so here's the example. At some point in early May, we had finished the new version of the crowd calendar, finished the recommendations. We were all happy with them. We looked back and compared our park recommendations to the data the things that actually happened in the park over the last 6 months to make sure that they were accurate. And so, for example, if we realized that Wednesday was a slow day at the Magic Kingdom, then we should be recommending Wednesday more frequently than, say, Thursday. If Thursday was busier, we made sure we were squared away on that. And then we realized, the day that we launched this, the people are going to log into the calendar who are leaving for Disney World the next day, and they may see some of their park recommendations change. So the question that we had was, given the information, right, given the fact that now we know something that we didn't know before, do we not tell people who are going tomorrow, or do we, and just hope for the best, or do we tell them and give them every piece of information that we have? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Cool. Well, guys, congratulations on the crowd calendar. I think it's a great success, and it helps make, again, everyone's trips a little easier, since you can. I think it makes figuring out which day is really going to be better for which park. So, guys, thank you very much for your hard work. You guys should be proud of the endeavor that you've completed.
Yeah, nice job, Fred.
Thank you.
And Fred, have an extra salmon on me.
Extra salmon. I got one in the fridge right now.
Canadian bacon.
Always goes down to insulting the Canadian listeners. Always.
That's good stuff, eh?
It's a classy show here.
Yes.
I'll have to get it out of the freezer.
Out in your house.
Hoser.
Well, that'll do it for us today. If you want to find our older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, you can visit the WDW Today website at WDWtoday.com. For Len Testa, Mike Scopa, Mike Newell, and Fred Hazelton, I'm Matt Hotchberg. We'll see you on the next show.
Stupid Judy, stupid energy.
This has been a production of Mouse World Radio.